Tides from the West, a Chinese autobiography, written by Chiang Meng-lin, read by Tang Da-ming.
Chapter 20. The Rise of the Kuomingtang to Power. After the fall of Peking, the country was once more a political hold. The capital of all China was moved to Nanjing and remained there. Peking, meaning North Capital, was changed to Beiping, Peace in the North, an old name of the city before it was known to the world. Peking had been the capital of 5 dynasties, the Liao, Jin, Yuan, Ming, and Qing, over a period of more than 1,000 years, and now ceased to be the capital, but it still remained the center of culture and art. The official dialect or language spoken by many of the educated classes in China, in addition to their local dialects, used in broadcasting stations and taught in schools, had its home in Peking. There were 2 main reasons why nationalist China shifted the capital from the Yellow River Valley in the north to the Yangtze River Valley in the south. The first was that the revolutionary spirit had permeated the latter area, which was therefore fertile soil, where it was easier for the new spirit to take firm root, while the Yellow River Valley was the home of the reactionary warlords. Secondly, the Yangtze Valley was the seat of China's financial power, which could provide the government with necessary funds. Nanjing had been the capital for the Taipings from 1851 to 1864. When they were dislodged from their last stronghold, the city was devastated and has never recovered its past glories. There were more ruins, wheat fields, vegetable gardens, and orchards than streets with buildings in that walled enclosure. The streets were narrow, rough, and filthy. The electric light no better than vegetable oil lamps. A foot messenger was often speedier than a telephone call. In the earlier periods of history, this city on the bank of the Yangtze was a center of culture and refinement, especially in the time of the southern dynasties. Its life of wine, women, and song dwelt in the memories of generations of literary men, poets, and artists. The Qinhuai Canal, connecting lakes of luxuriant lilies, traversed the city, crowded with singing houseboats, lit up by painted lanterns, and lavishly decorated with articles of art. On either bank of the canal, as a boat sailed leisurely by, there unrolled before one's eyes endless rows of restaurants and rooms elaborately furnished with painted columns and bamboo screens for literary, artistic, or musical entertainments. The air was laden with enchanting tunes and soothing scents that flowed out from behind the bamboo screens. Such was the city in days of old, but Nanjing was of strategic military importance. In every major war in the country, this city was destined to suffer devastation. After every conflict, its glories passed into memory, and from memory it was rebuilt upon its ruins when peace came. And from the memory of the past, as it was recorded, I have depicted a part of the old life of Nanjing. Since the Taipings, however, it has never recovered its ancient beauty. It is as if the successive restorations were only copies done by some vulgar artist of the original picture. After repeated copying, the color of the original was lost, and only vulgarity remained. From time to time, in periods after the Southern songs, which lasted from 1127 to 1276, scholars of Puritanic bent or Stoic leanings objected to the type of effeminate refinement which grew along the Qinhuai, now but an empty name with pleasant associations. But we must aver that the wrong lay not in enjoying the refinements of life, but in the neglect of work and duty which should go with enjoyment. If there were only work and no play, Jack would be a dull boy. The The Stoic ways of living, which came into vogue with the philosophers of the Song dynasty, bequeathed to China generations of dull jacks, which knew neither play nor the right sort of work. They killed art, and with art, life. They attacked bad morals, but countenanced that abominable and most immoral institution, the foot-binding of women. Compare this with life in the Tang dynasty, which lasted from 618 to 905, when work and play went hand in hand, and a healthy civilization shone like the brilliant sun upon all its neighbor nations. Think of the Tang dances. Mind you, there was no foot-binding then. Music, sports, poetry, painting, and calligraphy, and then of its great generals and their glorious armies. During the Tang period, Chinese civilization reached its zenith. After the Tangs came declining days. In the time of the northern songs, art persisted, but the martial spirit waned, until finally the philosophers of the south songs with their asceticism and moral speculation killed the arts both of peace and of war. The Qinhuai Canal still ran through the city of Nanjing. The houseboats and the apartments were there too. But the forms, the quality, and the content were all changed. The refinement of life had disappeared with the flowing waters of the Yangtze into the Yellow Sea. When the nationalist army entered Nanjing, a new spirit was born, a spirit of reform and reconstruction. Modern science was to revitalize the arts of days past. Upon the debris of the partly ruined city, a modern town was built with asphalt roads traversing all sections. Trees were planted and parks designed and developed. Automatic telephones, light, and water were installed. An aerial map was made from the seaplanes of the American gunboats stationed at Nanjing. On the basis of this map, a new city was planned. The Commission of City Planning, of which the writer was a member in his capacity as Minister of Education, worked for more than a year with an American architect of wide experience in Chinese architectural design in the enchanted city of Peking. The commission planned to retain as far as possible the grandeur and beauty of Chinese architecture, together with the convenience and hygienic installations of a modern city. Old, dilapidated buildings were torn down to make way for new roads and houses. Commerce began to prosper. Modern theaters multiplied to accommodate the growing population. The canal and the lakes were dredged, and old temples and other public buildings repaired. The Central Museum was built to house a part of the treasures from the Palace Museum of Peking, and an underground safety vault constructed for them, of reinforced concrete in a hill which would be immune to air bombing, for the directors foresaw the impending Japanese aggressions against a new capital. As the situation in the north grew worse and war clouds hung thick over this side of the Great Wall, the more valuable treasures of Peking were moved by hundreds of train loads to Nanjing, and before the fall of the new capital to the Japanese, all had been transported for safekeeping to caves in the mountains of the interior. The gigantic steel gate of the museum vault, with its intricate combination locks, was a piece of American ingenuity which humbled the Japanese. As reported from the occupied city, they worked on the locks for several days and finally gave up. The buildings of the Ministries of Communications and of Railways were of reinforced concrete with modern lighting system, ventilation, and conveniences. But their architectural design was altogether Chinese, with enamel tiles, painted columns, artistic windows, and other exterior decoration. These two imposing buildings stood opposite each other on Zhongshan Road, the main artery of traffic in the new metropolis, as monuments to China's old glory adapted to modern needs. Other buildings were planned and designed, but on account of the war, they all had to be postponed. The Sun Yat-sen Mausoleum, with blue enamel tiles and white marble columns, stood on the purple mountains outside the city, overlooking the hilly valley and the winding Yangtze. Flights of granite steps led up to the tomb of the father of the Chinese Republic. The mountains were reforested with trees from various parts of China. Flowering plants and fruit trees decorated the gentle slopes. An athletic field and stadium with a swimming pool were built at the foot of the mountain. A new model village was built in the rolling valley. A general plan was first laid out by the government, with roads, drainage, telephone and lighting systems, and school buildings. In the short space of a few years, new houses sprang up like mushrooms, with ample space around them for Orient gardens. Trees grew and plants flowered, the birds sang and streams flowed. Old ways of living gave place to a new life in which science and art, work and pleasure, nature and human endeavor went hand in hand. Such was the nucleus which it was hoped would grow and someday transform every corner of the land. It was a modest beginning, but had already borne fruit. For the new village movement had within a few years reached a number of cities and their surrounding areas. It was only a matter of time and further economic development for the new villages to change the mode of living of young China. We could not very well expect that all trouble from the warlords would end with the downfall of Peking. Their seat of government was gone, but their real power was entrenched in the provinces. The country was vast and communications poor. These conditions and the unsettled state of mind in the country afforded them good opportunities to nurse their ambitions. At any favorable moment, they were always ready to snatch more power. They lurked in the provinces like germs in the blood, ready to attack when the body weakened. In 10 years from the time his victorious army entered Peking to the eve of the Sino-Japanese War, Generalissimo Chiang Kai-shek had not a day's rest in his effort to unify the country. Like the Roman generals, who bound their ancient empire together by roads, he was not unmindful of the need to build more roads and railways and airlines. With Nanjing as a center, highways, railways, and airways were made to radiate from the capital to the provinces. A part of the communication system had existed before the nationalist government came to power. With this as a basis, it built new roads to make connections and extensions. Airlines were established to distant cities. From the new capital, one could fly to Peking, Kaifeng, Xi'an, and Lanzhou in the north, to Fuzhou, Guangzhou, and Kunming in the south, in the west to Hankou, Chongqing, and Chengdu. New railways were built to connect Hankou with Guangzhou and Kowloon, just opposite Hong Kong. If the Japanese had not at this time started trouble in northeast China, a continuous journey would have been possible in 1931 from either Hong Kong or Shanghai to Paris by rail. A through train ran from Shanghai via Nanjing, Jinan, and Tianjin outside the Great Wall, and via Mukden to Qiqihar in the northern part of northeast China, by Chinese railroads built parallel to the Japanese-owned South Manchurian Railway. A branch line from Qiqihar connected with the Trans-Siberian Railway. The progress of unification in China and the building of these parallel lines prompted the Japanese to try to take northeast China, or the 3 eastern provinces, at a stroke, which became known to the world as the Mukden Incident of September 18, 1931. Along the coast, the gap between the Qiantang and Cao'e rivers on the Shanghai-Hangzhou-Ningbo line was filled, but the laying of track was suspended when war broke out. The new line between Suzhou and Hangzhou, however, was completed before hostilities began. Another new line from Hankou running west to Jiangxi was finished just before the war, and during the war was prolonged farther west to Hunan, where it connected with the Guangzhou-Hankou Railway. The line was also further extended to Guilin, capital of the southwest province of Guangxi. Highways were extended more rapidly. The Nanjing-Hankou Highway was built during my sojourn in Nanjing, and I had the pleasure of going through it before it was open to traffic. It traversed the richest sections of Zhejiang and Jiangsu provinces. As the car wound its way along Tai Lake, one felt like stopping for a few days to sit under the pine trees and watch the sails rise or vanish over the horizon in the sunset. The fishermen cast their nets and drew up shining carp from the water. Tai is one of the 5 largest lakes in China, irrigating millions of acres of fertile land in the 2 most populous and cultured provinces of the country. This highway also passed through a bandit-infested region, but the bandits disappeared when the road was opened because troops could be rushed to the spot. Local troubles sometimes brewed as fast as construction progressed. At times, the railway and highway lines had to run a race with disturbance in areas without modern roads. The rebellion in Fujian province a year before the war was frustrated by central troops rushed down through the then newly built Hangzhou-Jiangshan Railway and along the roads also newly built from Hangzhou to that province. More roads meant less rebellion and less banditry, aside from the easy flow of products from one locality to another. Communication is the key to modernization and reforms, and to the discovery of possibilities of future development of the country. Thus, the nationalist government began its reconstruction program with the building of roads and railways. This was also the way to secure the unification of the country. Any local rebellion could be put down easily if good roads were available. Again, better and more communication means more travel and quicker exchange of ideas. Beautiful scenery, hitherto hidden in inaccessible parts of the country, suddenly opened to the appreciative eyes of scholars, painters, poets, and lovers of nature. Under the influence of the nationalist government, the provinces themselves began to build more roads. Existing roads were fast extended after the Kuomingtang came to power. During the war, troops were freely shifted on these roads from one province to another. A year or 2 before the war, a motor trip was made from Nanjing to Kunming, that is, from the east coast to the southwest frontier city, the starting point of the Burma Road. In the field of administration, an attempt was made to increase the efficiency of official business. New filing systems for official documents were devised and put into trial use. The form of language in official documents was simplified. A civil examination system was again inaugurated, but to the disappointment of those who had seen the old imperial days without the pomp and honors that had greeted the successful candidates. A new code of civil law was drafted. The status of women was raised to the same level as that of men. Daughters were to inherit property of their parents as hitherto only sons had done. Freedom of marriage was granted to the parties concerned when they came to legal age. A mutual agreement of the parties concerned is sufficient for legal divorce. The school curriculum was standardized and the proportion of science teaching increased. Physical training was emphasized. New laws were promulgated governing the universities, and the Central Research Institute, Academia Sinica, etc. were established to carry on research in science, history, economics, and engineering. The obnoxious internal customs system of Li Jin, which we shall see more of in the next chapter, was abolished. Government finance was put on a sounder basis. National currency was standardized. Government banks reorganized. The circulation of silver was later suspended and only government banknotes allowed to circulate. During the war, we began to realize the importance of this move. For if we had had to rely upon bulky silver as the medium of exchange, it would have been well nigh impossible to carry on the long years of war, while if the shift had been made in wartime, it would have caused great confusion. From 1927, when the capital was established at Nanjing, to 1937, when the Japanese army fired its first shots at the Marco Polo Bridge, only 10 short years were allowed to the nationalist government to do its job. During these 10 years, intermittent rebellions and other obstacles retarded the progress of reforms and reconstruction. Yet, in this brief time, 7,300 kilometers of railway were constructed, in contrast to 8,300 kilometers during the last 50 years. More than 100,000 kilometers of highway were built, and 33,000 kilometers of new telegraph lines were added to those already in existence. Yet, naturally, there could be only a moderate beginning in each phase of construction in so short an interval, and so it must be considered.
What you just heard is Tides from the West, a Chinese autobiography, written by Chiang Meng-lin, read by Tang Da-min, and published by the Foreign Language Teaching and Research Press. Some names and terminologies in this book have been updated per contemporary usages.